under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Here.
Commissioner Polavani?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here?
Mayor Burnett?
Here. We have a full house tonight. Excellent. For those in attendance tonight, there are copies of our agenda on either side of the room on those wood shelves on the wall. If you're watching at home, if you go to downers.us, lower left-hand corner, there is a this week's meeting link, and you'll be have an opportunity to see all the materials that we have here. With that, we're on to item 3 of our agenda, minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the executive session minutes for February the 11th, 2020, and the full council meeting minutes from February 18th, 2020, as presented.
Second.
Any council comments on those? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you all. Just like that, we're on to item 4 of our agenda tonight. This is an opportunity for public comments. This is the section of the meeting where we take public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here tonight to tell us about something or to ask us a question that's not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium. Agenda items will have the same opportunity when we hit those through the course of the evening. So come on up if you've got something on your mind. Everybody's rushing to the microphone. Come on up.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Francis. I've been a Downers Grove resident since, give or take, '89. I believe you're aware of my situation. I went to court yesterday and finally had my trial. 2 counts. The judge screwed me on 1, but let me off the second one. Whoopee. Yippee for me. It's like getting a birthday kiss from your sister. Anyway, Chapter 15, Section 205. I'm just going to pass the problem that we have, which is Article B. I'm going to go to C. Let's see if you can tell the difference here. I can use power tools, lawnmowers, chainsaws, sweepers, and yard equipment from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. If I wanted right now in my backyard, I could be using a chainsaw still for another 2 hours. Nobody can say anything about that because it gives me 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Section D, if I had heavy construction equipment, I could have used those from 7 this morning till just now. I'd have to stop now. But if we go to Section B, it reads, no person shall keep within the village any dog or any other animal which makes unreasonable barking or howling or noises which disturbs the peace. First question, who determines what unreasonable is? You? You? Me? Anybody? Who determines that? It's an opinion. Secondly, how do we measure unreasonableness? It's not in here, is it? It doesn't say unreasonableness is this much or that much or something else. No decibels. No type of unreasonableness. Did you notice, by the way? I'll refresh your memory. Power tools, lawnmowers, and chainsaws or sweepers or yard equipment. 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. Sundays, I can do it from 8 in the morning till 9. I forgot to mention that before. That heavy construction equipment, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now, I'll read B again. No person shall keep within the village any dog or other animal which makes unreasonable barking or howling or other noises which disturbs the peace. Notice how I didn't say any time limit in there? So if I'm using a chainsaw and a lawnmower and, let's just say, some power tools in my backyard until 9 p.m., that's fine. But if this dog right here barks in the afternoon, let's say 3 o'clock, that's no good. The B part, the very first evening I was in here, I asked you, look at this and change it. Well, here's the change. Maybe put in some kind of time restriction. How much more unreasonable noise and disturbing of the peace does this dog make at 3 in the afternoon than if I'm using, I love chainsaws, so I use that all the time. My chainsaw, my lawnmower, and my yard equipment. How much more unreasonable is he at 3 in the afternoon? Okay? That's what I'm asking. I'm asking maybe write this so I get some kind of break. Because people get the to withhold their right of unreasonable noise and disturbing of the peace, but I don't get to have a right to have a dog, which does what dogs do. They bark. And you know what's going to happen even worse? When that police officer that comes to give me the ticket, he's going to bark even more. And if you're standing in my yard looking at him, taking a videotape or an audio tape, he's going to bark even more after that too. Because what's a dog's job to do in life? Let me know that you're there. Do you want me to remind you again how it doesn't say anything whatsoever in Section B?
I think we got it.
Okay. The other stuff is 7 a.m. to 9 and 7 a.m. to 7, or 8 a.m. to 9 on Sundays. Please, maybe look into checking that. Section 15-205, Article B. Maybe put some time in there. Because I know for a fact that while this dog's alive, and that's going to be another 12 years easy, my neighbor is going to call the police. And every time I'm going to come here and let you know about it. I get tired of me real fast. You got to get tired of me a whole lot faster than that. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you,
One
Francis.
last thing, as per the things I talked about last time, the Earth is going to die in 11 years. There is no Planet B.
Thank you, Francis.
Try that.
Just to be clear, we don't get tired of residents coming, even if we don't agree. Thank you. Anybody else? Please, come on up.
Good evening, Jim Watson. Can't make it next week, so I thought I'd bring some of my comments this week about the plans for Village Hall. Don't have anything formally prepared, but been thinking about it and talking with a lot of the residents in town, and really a lot of excitement about this. The opportunity to really showcase our town and show what we're all about. I mean, this building, it's not a historic building, it's an old factory from what I understand. It's not something we want to keep around, and we really want to make an addition to this downtown area that I think really does lend itself to the brand and the name of Downers Grove, and I'm just excited about that. Wanted to say, you know, I'm excited to see what plans we have next week. Unfortunately, I'll have to watch it offline. But really excited to see what's happening. And like I said, the people I've talked to, my neighbors, the residents, really excited about it too. So can't wait to see more about it. So thank you. Appreciate all the work that's been done. I know this has been a lot of work, a lot of research. Really do trust all the stuff you put into it, and excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others on subjects not on tonight's agenda? Please, come on down.
Hi, I'm Brad Phillips. I'm a member of the Downers Grove Clean Energy Task Force. First, just real briefly, I also am a dog owner, and my ears kind of perked up when I heard the reading of that ordinance. It seems a little vague. I might look into it, but it would be nice if that law was, if that is how it's written, was a little clearer and maybe gave better guidelines, because dogs do bark, and like everything of mine do. Happily, my neighbors have been fairly okay with that. The actual question I have, and I don't know if this is actually the form to ask it, and I apologize if it's not. I have a question about electrical bills for residents in the town. There's a line item on here that's franchise cost, and my understanding from what little research I've done is that is a fee that is put on us to pay for what ComEd pays the village or the local government entity, whatever that entity is, for the right to provide energy to that government entity. Do you know if that's true?
I don't know for sure, but I know we can find out very quickly.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is ask you to touch base with the guy at the end of the desk there.
Okay.
He'll get your name and contact information, and we'll get that, we'll get a very clear answer to that right
Great.
away.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other comments not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll move on then to our consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any council comments regarding the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 6 on our agenda tonight is our active agenda. This is the point in our meeting where we are going to take up a subject which we likely will take action on tonight. There is one item on tonight's active agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the golf course liquor license classification as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any council comments or questions on the amendment to the golf course liquor license that we're going to consider tonight? Any council comments or questions? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Short active agenda tonight. Next is our first reading. First reading points in our meeting are times where we will discuss subjects that we're not going to take action on this evening. These typically tend to be a little bit more conversational, a little more workshop-ish. Oftentimes, they are the first opportunity for us and you to see or hear about the subjects. And we will turn it over to staff to introduce the first item tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 3 items on tonight's first reading agenda. We'll start with item A, which is consideration of an ordinance regarding a planned development amendment for electric copy change signs at a shopping center at the intersection of 75th and Lamont. Here to provide the background information on this item is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fieldman noted, this is a planned unit development amendment for off-premise electronic message center signs on Lamont Road down here at 75th and Lamont Road on the south side of town. The PUD here is outlined in blue, so it encompasses the majority of the shopping center there as well. What we're looking at is 2 of these off-premise electronic message board signs on the north part of the PUD there as well. Just wanted to clarify some things too to make sure that we're all on the same page. Electric vehicle charging stations are permitted by right throughout the community, so that's just a building permit. The request tonight is specifically about off-premise signage and electronic changeable copy / message boards, so just want to be clear on that. Where we see these proposed to be located, the first set of these signs are located on the north side of the Shop and Save parking lot area there, approximately 130 feet back from the Lamont Road property line. The second set of signs are further south in the parking lot, just south of the entrance to Shop and Save, adjacent here to some vacant spaces. And then you see the pictures here that were taken when it was snowing a few weeks ago. And those are approximately 336 feet from the nearest property line, which in this case happens to be a common property line with the restaurant there at the corner here. To review the sign ordinance was adopted in 2005. The goal to reduce size and amount of signage. There was an amortization period originally through 2012. It was extended to 2014. There's a report link in the manager's memo to talk about the sign ordinance and how it was implemented and how it was amortized throughout that time. In 2015, there was a request to consider a text amendment to allow electronic message center signs, and council at that time did not direct staff to make that amendment. With regard to the comprehensive plan, it does talk about shopping center modernization, incremental improvements that we see to achieve a balance between the past and the future. With regard to the planned unit development standards, the Plan Commission conducted a public hearing on February 3rd and found that those standards for approval had been met and recommended approval of the request. Based on the current sign ordinance and past policies, the Village Council staff does not recommend approval of the petition. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions for you as well. The petitioners here tonight as well, and they have a presentation prepared as well.
Thank you, Stan. Why don't we do that next? Going to go ahead and go through that presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this proposed amendment this evening. My name is Talar Berberian. I'm the zoning attorney for the applicant with the offices of Thompson Coburn at 55 East Monroe in Chicago, for the record. I am joined here this evening by Barbara Lancaster, who is a vice president at Volta Industries, Inc., the applicant. I'm going to invite Ms. Lancaster to speak a little bit about the applicant and their operations, and then I'll come back and talk to you about the standards that we hope to meet this evening.
And you do the clicker.
Yeah.
Good evening. First, thank you, Mayor Barnett and Commissioners, for allowing Volta to participate in this evening's council meeting. First, what I'm going to do is just provide you a high-level overview of what we perceive as being the benefits to Downers Grove by allowing our Volta charging stations. First and foremost, Volta is committed to provide the Downers Grove community a cleaner and more sustainable future through our network of free EV public charging stations. We do this by partnering with local businesses, and in return, the local businesses see an uptick in shoppers to their locations. Second, this is very important. We have a responsibility to our site partners as well as the national brands that provide the free charging on our charging stations to make sure that our stations are up and running 100% of the time and kept to the standard to which our site partners and brand partners expect. So through this, this actually leads to job creations locally through the maintenance of our retail centers where they're located. Next, and I know doing research and prepping for this meeting, I was telling Mike, Downers Grove has a very strong commitment to sustainability. Congratulations, I saw for the 7th year in a row you won the Green Fleet Award, which is very impressive. A little side note, I actually come from Tesla and I worked in fleet, so I know 7 years you guys were a leader in that. Similar with Volta, we've been around for 10 years, and because we have a free charging network, each unit delivers approximately 30,000 miles of fossil fuels reduction in 30,000 miles of fossil fuels. So I like to say, our main mission is to help accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, and by helping overcome range anxiety, our free charging stations do that. And then finally, we have a commitment to partner with the City of Downers Grove. In addition to supporting your sustainability initiative, we'll also work with you on utilizing our digital billboards to promote public messaging, whether it's a public safety message or if you want to notify the community about 4th of July fireworks. We'll work with you, we'll partner with you to use the digital billboards to do that as well. Sorry. Like I can wing it all night. So most importantly, I think for the small local businesses, we have seen time and time again, we get feedback that because we provide this free amenity, that it's going to drive shoppers to those local businesses. I was just talking to someone before the meeting started, they had never shopped at Meijers before they discovered that Meijers had free EV charging, and now that's their go-to shopping center. As I mentioned, we'll work with you on putting messaging on the screen. So there's definitely a public service aspect to it. The local jobs for maintenance and the retail centers where they're located. And then most importantly, because I'm sure you've all seen charging stations, right, throughout. I know there's quite a few in Downers Grove and throughout Illinois. Because our stations are free, we are the only free universal charging station network out there. Our stations are utilized 5 times more than the pay-as-you-go charging stations, which results in about 7 hours a day utilization, which is significant. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
this image is simply, we'll come back to it if there are questions about the units, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the standards that we are obligated to meet in your consideration of this PD amendment. So the first standard is that the PD is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we took a look at the Downers Grove comprehensive plan, which is full of commitments to providing sustainable economic opportunities and increasing infrastructure for electric vehicles at retail centers is going to be obviously part of meeting this commitment to the village. And also it encourages sustainable energy usage so that allowing people the opportunity to charge their cars will support the network of electric car charging in the region, and it will encourage folks to consider purchasing an electric vehicle where they might not otherwise have because they don't believe the resources are available in the town in the village to support that usage. The next standard is whether the proposed complies with the PUD overlay district provisions. And again, these provisions stress energy conservation and sustainability. They again stress compatibility with the comprehensive plan, which we addressed. And this is an important one, they address flexibility and creativity in responding to changing market conditions. With the retail climate, the way it is, the way we see it, we feel that allowing retailers, the opportunity, retailers at Downers Park Plaza specifically, which does have a number of vacant storefronts, the opportunity to locate this amenity for shoppers at the site will give these retailers a competitive advantage, not only to draw folks from within the community to the shopping center, but also to encourage folks who might be driving through to stop in at Shop and Save or at another retailer in the center to pick up their evening groceries or what have you in order to, top off their charge and head home on the way home from work. And we really see this as a benefit to our retail partners. There was the property manager or one of the property management team was here at Plan Commission, and he spoke to being excited that hopefully this amenity would be a part of that shopping center if this proposal is approved. And again, incorporating green infrastructure as part of the PUD overlay district standards. So I think this is actually the most important standard to hit tonight, and that is whether the proposed development will result in public benefits greater than what the underlying zoning would permit. The underlying zoning does not permit the signage. As Mr. Popovich mentioned, it does permit the EV charging. However, as Volta has been operating over the last 10 years, they have seen a trend that where for-pay units are offered, they are very underutilized, and they often, if not always, require a very significant contribution from the retailer itself. So that is a disincentive for those retailers to invest in that amenity, because they are then their only method for recouping their investment is to take a little bit off the top of whatever small amount people pay to get.
They in essence charge for electricity, and which results in a lower usage. I don't want to go too much into the weeds. I don't know if any of you have electric vehicles. I know you have hybrids, but if you think about your smartphone, the majority of the charging of electric vehicles is going to be done in the comfort of your own home, in your garage. You're going to program it with your app and at noon, like for off-peak hours. So similar to your smartphone, you're not going to go somewhere and pay, right, to charge your phone. However, it's the same thing with an EV. If you're able to charge for free, you're going to do it, right? So going back to what I said earlier, if someone knows, hey, I'm at 70% and I go to the shopping center and I can top off my car, that's really attractive. No one's going to go and if they're at 70% range and say, okay, I'm going to pay, $5 to do this. I'll just wait till I get back home. Does that make sense?
And so that reality really makes the climate such that unless it's free, the infrastructure is not going to multiply in a way that's going to encourage folks to use EVs. So although this request is for the signage, it really is for establishing the infrastructure, because without the signage, that infrastructure is unsustainable. It's not a good model for EV charging. So the benefit of supporting this infrastructure is what we're asking you to consider this evening. And I also would ask you to weigh that benefit against the impact that this signage will have. Can you actually fast forward to the last few photos that we have? A little bit more, yeah. So these photos that Mr. Popovich showed were really helpful to show the units themselves, but these photos that we have are actually from the right-of-way. And we know that a lot of sensitivity to signage comes from the distraction of drivers, especially to changeable messaging and things like that, the distraction that it might pose to drivers on the right-of-way. These are essentially invisible from the right-of-way. You can maybe, and these were turned on, these are completely turned off since the village informed us that they were not permitted. but they were turned on for this picture. So you can see that tiny little, I don't know if you can, but I'll flip over and point it out. Sorry. This tiny little blip right there, that is actually the nearest station to the right-of-way. So the impact of these stations is actually quite limited, particularly because this site is enormous. And although we realize we're asking for a concession, an amendment to the sign ordinance, which this village worked very hard on and has declined to make changes to in the past, that ordinance and the zoning ordinance appropriately is developed in order to address the zoning of an ordinary lot, an ordinary commercial lot in Downers Grove. This lot is not an ordinary commercial lot in Downers Grove. It is gigantic. It's huge. It's over 1 million square feet of space. And so as compared to what, I believe it's 72 square feet of signage we're adding to the site out of 1 million square feet of space. So given that, impact is so minimal from our perspective, and we hope from yours as well, the benefit so far outweighs that impact. And sorry, if you can just go back to my last standard. One more forward. There we go. So the last, no, that's the one. The last standard is whether appropriate conditions have been imposed on the approval to mitigate the impact. So as I mentioned, these units are pretty far away from the right-of-way, and that distance is written right into the conditions of this ordinance amendment. So no unit will be able to be any closer than that closest unit that I showed you on that right-of-way. And to further limit the impact of these units, this permission will be limited to this PD only. It will not have an impact on other zoning lots in the village at all, unless those folks go through the same rigorous process we've been through. They will absolutely come before you. They'll be before the Plan Commission as well. They'll be vetted through staff before anything like this comes to pass in the village of Downers Grove. The other conditions that staff has imposed and we've agreed to, in fact, Volta does not have flashing images or movable images as a matter of their business model. So they will be static images that rotate once every 10 seconds. Only 4 units will be permitted in the PD, and every 8th turn will be reserved for village content, which Barbara touched on. And then finally, they will be dimmed at 9 p.m. and turned off at 10, and that was actually, this condition was actually made a bit more restrictive at Plan Commission. They said either 10 p.m. or close of business at the last retailer at the site, whichever comes first. So they will never be on past 10, but they might, depending on the hours of the stores, they might be turned off prior to 10 p.m. And I think that's the last standard, right? And I'll just have, if you don't mind, flipping through the rest of those photos so you can see what these look like from the right-of-way. You can keep going. So you can, I really like, I can't even see them. They're here and here. And then if you go one more, here's one there. So this, for those at home, all those at home watching us, the point of these images really is to show you how large this parking lot is and how uncharacteristic a site this is. So we think this site is really uniquely appropriate for this request based on that. So, we're happy to answer questions after questions. Do I get to close or do I do that now?
We'll start discussing things here,
Sure.
so if you'd just not go too far, in case there are specific questions that
we'll
maybe
be right
it'd be
here.
best to answer.
No problem.
Thank you. So are there any council questions for either Stan or the petitioner, or just general comments? Now's our time to kick this around.
I had
Rich,
just
go ahead.
a brief question, Stan, to get it on the record. So a PUD, a concession for a PUD does not represent a precedent, correct?
No, because the PUD is an overlay district in essence.
Okay. And with, also with a PUD, you don't need a hardship to get an exception?
You just have to meet the standards as we define them in the staff report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Question for council. We're comfortable as a condition putting in the village content piece?
It's certainly okay to put that in, or we don't have to include it in there, knowing that it's available to us. We can have it either way.
From the management side, not the legal side, if this does get approved, I would like to have a condition in there that guarantees that if we ever wanted to, we could, but we don't have to exercise it.
And we can work with you on that, creating that content too, as part
She
of
needs to be on the mic.
agreement.
Okay.
Good.
Can I just make a point? I'm not sure they can hear you at home unless you're in front of the mic.
Thanks, Rich.
Sure.
Yeah, we do
Yeah,
have,
we're being filmed.
with all our high tech here this evening, we do have folks watching at home, and truly, if you're not on the mic, they're not going to know what's
They can't
going
hear
on.
us.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Please
You'll be
keep that
on
in mind.
YouTube perpetually.
Really?
perpetually.
That's funny, because my daughters always tell me I speak loud enough, so.
We could hear you just fine.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh?
Just a couple of quick questions. Thank you both for the presentation. I wanted to know, do we have any information currently, either for the site we're talking about or other sites, related to how many cars are being served currently in terms of on a kind of weekly, monthly? I know what we're talking about is new, but do we have any information?
I'm sorry, do you mean served by the units themselves?
Correct.
So at this site, the units have never been operable
Okay,
because
so-
as soon as they were built, the village informed us that we could not operate them.
Okay, so I didn't know if those were mutually exclusive or together, the signage and the charging station.
They are, yes.
Okay, all right. And then the second question was, any information on the lowering of customer acquisition costs? The big thing for the clients that are being advertised for, is there any information that shows some real connection between the advertising and how that helps bring those costs down for the clients?
So the advertisers tend to be national brands.
Okay.
And what we measure is, it would be brand lift. So that's one measurement and metrics that we look at. And then on the flip side, for the retailers or our site partners, then we measure things like dwell time. So we see an uptick in dwell time, which usually, if you're a grocer, translate into larger basket size. So we also, and I don't think this came up, for the site partners, so for instance, like a Whole Foods, we do offer them one flip too. So in this circumstance, we'll partner with Downers Grove to offer you a digital flip, and then we'll partner with the grocer to offer them a digital flip too.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to further address that, the cost of installing one of these stations is in the low six figures. It's a big commitment. And Volta signs a 10-year lease with its retailers, so it commits to stay long-term at these sites. And partially, that's also to be able to recover that investment. So, and they do that at zero cost to the retailer. Whereas if these are, in every other business model we know of, the 4 pay stations, they impose oftentimes 50% of the cost on the retailer itself. And because of the small margins on that electric charge, the cost of the electric charge, it takes both the retailer and the provider a really long time to recoup their investment. And so it makes it very hard to find appropriate sites, and it makes it very difficult to keep these a sustainable feature. You'll see a lot of unused, no longer used 4 pay stations because people just, they're not making money. So this, in introducing the signage and permitting the signage, this takes the charging aspect away from the profitability of the use, and it allows Volta to provide the amenity without being constrained by the amount of money they can make from the charge.
Thank you.
Marge?
Could you elaborate a little bit on the content of the advertisements? You said they were national brands as well as maybe the grocery store?
Sure. So usually when we begin a partnership with a local grocer or a retail partner, we have an MSA, and in that MSA, we work with them on restrictions. So for instance, if a store only sells Coca-Cola, but they want to make sure Pepsi doesn't advertise there. So, or if it's Myers, you can't advertise Whole Foods there. So that's pretty straightforward, and that is specific to that site partner. Because again, we want to drive business to them and not away to somewhere else. In terms of, is your question specific to political ads, alcohol, or just whatever?
Any of the above. I don't know what you offer.
Yeah. So basically, we have on a high level, and we can get you a list. We no obscene ads, no cigarette ads. Pretty standard for media. And then again, what is actually shown there is going to be negotiated between Volta and the site partner before we even go live. So. We have like specific advertisers who are on our sites. We have Cliff Bar, we have Nissan. Automotive is actually one of the largest advertisers no matter what the media is. So that's definitely our largest vertical that advertises with us. And then a lot of the CPG brands, because since we're at a lot of grocers, it just makes sense that they're going to, we call it, it's a new term, it's called entrance marketing. So if you see a certain water advertised, before you enter a grocery store, we have found in some of the surveys that we've done that there's been a lift in purchase of that brand of water. But overall, it would be brands that you'd be familiar with. Does that answer your question?
Not really. I was looking for something more like breakfast cereal, but I get where you're going.
Well, yeah. So I was like, so different verticals, yeah. So like we work with Kellogg's on their cereals and that. We would try and tie it in with shopper marketing. So if they're doing a promotion within the store for Frosted Flakes, we would work with their ad agency or the brand itself to also run a similar ad on the charging stations before they actually went in the store. So it'd be as you came in and then once you saw end of shelf.
Thank you.
I want to jump in on that a little bit. So, assuming the marketing is effective, right? That's why your advertisers are paying for it. They think it is.
Yeah.
But sales tax is an enormous issue to the Village of Downers Grove. Now, we're not alone in that. Every municipality is looking for every dollar they can get. So if you're advertising Nissan, that probably works. If you're advertising Tesla, not so much.
Well, Tesla doesn't advertise.
But you see where I'm going with this, right? You made the comment about Pepsi being, on the advertising.
Right.
Let's say the retailer only stocks Coca-Cola products. They wouldn't want Pepsi on the billboard.
Right.
I would be not real thrilled to see Whole Foods being advertised, as an example.
Right.
So is there any way that you guys can see that gets balanced? Because as you're going forward and we're no longer paying attention, and the operations are between Volta and the shopping center owner, how does that get managed in a way that we would feel like we weren't driving people out of Downers Grove?
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Well, the whole goal of the benefit to the site partners would be to not only drive people to shop in Downers Grove, but to shop at that establishment. I don't know of a case per se where, most of our brands, like a State Farm, most likely there's going to be a State Farm here. So when we work with our ad agencies, they look at the different DMAs, and they're only going to buy. So if it's not like a specific grocery store where they're promoting a cereal that they're also selling inside there, and say, like I said, it's insurance and it's State Farm, they have the ability to only buy stations where there's a State Farm office located. So if it's a business that does not have, like, within a certain radius, an office or ability to provide that service or solution, their ad agency is not going to buy that particular location. So I guess what I'm saying is it kind of self-regulates themselves, because no one would want to advertise there unless there was a demographic either shopping there in that area that could purchase that service or product.
Yeah, we'll have to give that a little more thought. I understand what you're saying, but you're actually literally right on the border of Downers Grove. So if you took a market area, your market area would extend. Hopefully, the mall, I'm sure, is counting on the market area extending quite a bit farther than, right there. And it's just something in my head as we start talking about national advertisers. That's probably enough for the moment on it. Nicole, you haven't had a chance yet.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. From what I understand, we currently do have other electronic charging stations in town. Is that correct? That do not utilize electronic signage. Do those charge the person charging a fee?
Oh, sure.
We do have some. I don't know, because I haven't researched those, whether they charge a fee, but we can find out for sure.
Okay, that would be great.
And then we do have some that are in homes as well, where people have installed them in their garages.
Correct. Thank you.
Sorry, we actually did do the research, and it's our case, so it makes sense. There are 6 other charging stations or shopping centers or car dealerships that have charging stations in Downers Grove, and none of them are for free.
I would still like to know if staff could answer that, maybe how much also. Thank you.
Anything else? Rich?
Do the local stores and the shopping centers ever advertise, or would they be able to? Like, for instance, what Dollar Tree's there, Hallmark?
Yeah, absolutely. We would welcome that. Matter of fact, we would look to see who is in that shopping center, and our media team would reach out and see if they would be interested in buying one of the flips.
So would that be a normal part of your marketing efforts, as you would, I don't know, cold call or whatever to those people?
Absolutely.
Say this is going to be something, would you like to play?
Yeah, absolutely.
Leslie, got anything? No? We'll take a minute here and see if there's any comments or questions from folks in the audience. Please come on down to the microphone so, again, the folks at home can hear you.
Hi, thank you for the time. Again, Brad Phillips, representing the Downers Grove Clean Energy Task Force. Just from a standpoint of both representing my group and also as a citizen, this seems, based on this presentation, this seems like a pretty reasonable request and benefit to the community. I personally own a hybrid. It's not a plug-in, but I could easily see down the road I will own one. I know several people in the town already who do own them, and given that most major auto manufacturers have stated that going forward they're going to be producing more and more electric vehicle lines, there's going to be a growing need for this type of thing in the village. And I think that a growing number of our citizens would benefit from this or things like this. We'd love to see more EV charging stations installed. And given, again, that it seems fairly unobtrusive, to me it seems like a fairly reasonable thing to do. So I would like to just state my support and the support of my group for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Riley. I'm born and raised in Downers Grove. I just thought well, quite honestly, this is maybe my second, probably my first village council meeting. I'm not a big get out there and jump in front of things, but I thought I'd listen up when I know about the voltage charging station and see if there was maybe a perspective that I could offer to the council. So I'm born and raised in Downers. I have the happiness to raise my own family now in Downers Grove. About a year and a half ago, a bit at my wife's urging, we got ourselves an electric vehicle, and I think I saw not really anyone out there has one, if I saw that correctly. Of all the things you think of, it's great that it's good for the environment. That's not really why I got it. I'm a tech guy. It was fun to drive. What I wasn't expecting, though, out of having the car is it's actually changed my family's shopping habits. And a little bit, Mayor, I think, but I heard you say about wanting the sales tax in Downers Grove. It's a Tesla that we have. When we got it, we got a free supercharging for life of the car deal. I don't have a charger at home. I go off a little wall outlet. It doesn't charge super fast. But the superchargers are at the Myers over in Bolingbrook. So you're sitting there for 20, 30 minutes to charge your car up to full. What are you going to do? We now shop at Meijer. It's a regular part of my family's routine every week when we need to go for the big grocery haul. It's either a tag team, I drop my wife at Costco and I go charge while she's shopping, or we just go to Myers. It's one of the others. It also, for us, plays out into our movie theater selection. There's happens to be Volta at the Yorktown Theater. There's also one at the AMC in Oak Brook. I'm a sample size of one person, 5 people, residents of Village Downers Grove. When we're looking for a movie to go see, we will check those theaters first. Likewise for dining, if there is a charger in the area, we're more likely to pick that restaurant, that particular place. It's just, I didn't think about it this way, but I heard the term range anxiety. I didn't realize I had that. Apparently I do. But anyway, so I found it unique, and I wanted to put that idea out there that it's for me, it's more than just being green, but it's, you know, if you went to the Jewel and they said they're going to fill up your gas tank while you're there for free, you'd probably do it. No offense to the Volta folks, I quite honestly don't look at the advertising. I'm not an advertising guy. I know the lit up signs make me aware they're there. That's how I found out about Volta, because there's one under a parking garage structure near the Nordstroms in Oak Brook. I saw the light. What's that? It's called Volta. Oh, it's a charger. I have an electric car. Let's go take care of it. So that's kind of what it did for me. I don't mean any heresy or anything, but to me, for me, it's more about the locations, and I'm going to take my car there, especially if it's a slightly longer thing, movie watching, shopping, dining. I'm going to go there. And I know nothing of ordinances. I know you all good people have your mind for the thinking of the best of the village. But if you're looking to revitalize things, especially, and kind of what brought me here today too, growing up in Downers, those malls at 75th and Lamont aren't the dandiest going on right now. And I often speak from experience. I used to work in the hardware department at the Venture, to date myself, there at 75th and Lamont Road. Side note, if any of your families ordered paint from there, I was the one mixing it, and I apologize now, but you shouldn't put teenagers in charge. But it would seem to me, I'm sure there's smarter people than I, but a simple way to get people to maybe try and want to shop there is get free anything. Put out free candy, free sandwiches, free electric charging. I'm going to bring my car there at some point. And right now I don't. I do go to Jewel because it's close to where I live. But when it's more planned shopping, I'm going to Myers, I'm going to the Whole Foods in Willowbrook. It does have an impact that way. That's all.
Thank you. Any other audience comments? Come on down.
Hello, my name's Paul Husky. I've been in Downers Grove since 2012, and my wife and I are EV advocates. We both drive electric cars, Teslas, and specifically are attracted to Volta. I shop at the Whole Foods in Willowbrook specifically because they have a Volta charger. So I guess originally, when I first moved here, I went to the Hinsdale one, but I haven't been there, I think, since they put in the Volta charger. So not sure how many years it's been, maybe 1 or 2 years. But it definitely helps, for just to have that kind of convenience of plugging in there. We're definitely not filling up our cars there when we go there, but it's an amenity that we appreciate, and it helps us in our shopping decisions. So in this case, if this one is turned on, then I think that's our new produce go-to. Coming home, it's a little more convenient for me instead of going all the way east. It's sort of right on my commute home to stop there and shop at the Shop and Save. So, I just wanted to speak that. And I guess another item is my brother drives a Nissan Leaf, and he sort of counts on level 2 chargers like this to charge his car more so. Like, my wife and I have a charger at home, so that's our primary source of charging. But we look out for places like this, because it's, you feel welcome, and it's just a more enjoyable experience. But for a little brother that has a Nissan Leaf, like, he counts on this more so, without having a charger at home to get around more so. And as people are coming into the EV community with these sort of lower range cars, level 2 chargers like this are definitely appreciated. So that's my piece.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Oh, can you hang on for just a second?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
How did you know that they were at Whole Foods? How did you know they were at Hinsdale? How did you know they were at Whole Foods? And
I think driving by an 83 there, maybe I stopped in a Whole Foods, because originally there was one, it was a little bit east of there. And, so just checking out the new store, I saw it. I think just maybe stopping at, at the new Whole Foods they put in there.
okay.
We do have an app too that drivers can download. So if they want to see where Volta chargers are, they can just look at the app and it will tell them where. So if they're in Downers Grove and the charger's turned on, they can see that there's 4 chargers at this location and 3 are available.
Thank you.
Maybe I haven't caught this discussion well enough. With one tiny itty bitty exception, everything I've heard has been why this is a good thing. You brought up pushing shoppers away, and I can appreciate being a location at a shopping center. I know where it is, and I can get that one. But why not have this? I haven't heard any reason why you wouldn't want this. And when Commissioner Gray asked a question, it sounded like their answer had something to do with stuff is there, but they never got to use it. Was that the case? Is something somewhere that could never be used?
So, hey, Francis, let me help you out here. So we have an ordinance that's been on the books for quite some time that prohibits electronic copy signs, okay? And so I'm assuming that wasn't clearly known and understood. And so the mall and Volta got together and installed some chargers that have as a component of them changeable copy signage.
Okay.
And so right now, those chargers are not able to be used as they're intended because they're in conflict with our ordinance. What's before us here is the question about whether or not that mall happens to be a planned unit development. I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail, but within that planned unit development, whether we want to adjust rules to allow for those chargers to operate as they're intended.
I can get that. Part of the other problem I have is the fact that I drive a hybrid because I can't yet afford a plug-in car. And because just lately, big fat Governor Porky has jacked up.
Okay, hey, stop, please. Come on.
Okay.
You've been here enough. You know you get to speak your piece. Let's not do that,
Sorry.
okay?
Anyway, he jacked up the registration fee on electric and hybrid cars based on infrastructure taxes to pay for the roads through gas tax. And if I can get something for free, plugging in my car that I gotta pay more for because it's electric, I'm gonna go to those places. Like was stated, the theaters, and like it was stated, the shopping centers, if it's there for me for free, you know I'm shopping there. I shop in Downers Grove anyway, but the fact still stands. That really brings in more people shopping. And it, tangent here off of that again, in the last year I've only seen one chunk of road being fixed, and that's the big whole Ogden Avenue deal. Where else are we spending our infrastructure money, if someone could just mention that? Because if I got to pay more for my electric vehicle, I want some stuff fixed.
I can't speak to where the state's all spending their money, Francis. I don't know. The
Don't-
state does that
Downers Grove-
licensing. The state does that licensing that you're talking about.
Doesn't Downers
Not
Grove
part
get money from the state for infrastructure?
We do get some. It goes.
I just would like to know, where's that being spent?
We'll figure that out and.
I'm not
and
blaming you, and I'm not
we'll
complaining.
figure out how to direct you to that list.
I'm not complaining.
All right.
I'm
It's
saying-
actually item C tonight, so your timing's
Oh,
great.
there you go.
Yeah.
So hang tight.
I'm just saying I gotta pay more. I wanna see it in my village.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Any other audience, please come on down.
So Paul and I, we live on Prospect down the street, Downers Grove. I think we call ourselves EV warriors. Again, I agree with that gentleman. I don't see why this is a problem. You can hardly see it. We've driven by this space many times. You can hardly see the charging stations. A few concerns I have are, one, if we're going to say that we are a green village, why isn't this going up? If we're reducing any carbon emissions by 30,000 per unit, looking at it from a nursing perspective, it helps with people's health. It not only respiratory systems, cardiovascular, renal systems, hepatic systems, everything, all the pollution that's in the air, if we're helping to eliminate any small amount of it, these charging stations are going to help with that, even in a small measure. Whatever signage issues are there, I don't like flashing lights, and yet I'm driving down Ogden Avenue and I'm seeing all kinds of signs that are offensive to my eyes. I'm very light sensitive, sound sensitive, so I get where this might be a problem. So I don't understand why something you can barely see from a road is going to be offensive to the village. And speaking to the range anxiety, I think my husband mentioned that my brother-in-law has a Nissan Leaf. He cannot get to work and back on a full battery. So battery degradation over time is such a big concern that you can lose up to 20% in a year with certain models. And some people who cannot afford the Teslas are going to choose, I don't know, besides Nissan Leaf, whatever the compliance vehicles are. They tend to have smaller batteries. You can get from point A to point B. You might have 50 miles of range, but really if you turn on the air conditioning or if you turn on the heat, you're going to be down to a smaller amount that you can use. So a round trip work and back is going to lead you to a very small amount. But if you're going to stop by at the Shop and Save or the, I think, TJ Maxx or whatever is over there, charge up for 20 minutes, it'll give you that extra level of comfort to get home and then plug in your car overnight. This, to me, again, is kind of a no-brainer. I'm still a little confused on signage issues, why there's so many other signs that, to me, are offensive as far as lights and flashing and what have you, and this is something you can barely see off the road. So.
Thank you. Okay, any other audience comments? All right, back to the council. We have other comments, questions? Marge, please.
Yeah, I have some more questions about, you said this is not a supercharger. What is it? If it's not a supercharger, a regular charger, what is the difference?
A supercharger is a fast charger. So that is going to charge your car to almost 100%. Within an hour, depending on the size of the battery. Our chargers are level 2 chargers, so that's going to be a slower charge. Typically, it takes up to, again, depending on the size of your battery, about 7 to 8 hours to get a full charge. So that's when we talk about just like topping off with our level 2 chargers. It's not going to give that customer a full charge. It's going to give them maybe 20 to 30% more.
Okay, the advertising screens on these, do they run whether someone's plugged in or not?
Yes.
So they're running no matter what, outside, whether someone's plugged in and using it, these screens are still going to constantly run?
Correct, unless the chargers are turned off per the agreement. No. Really, just to explain the media model a little bit more, even at full usage of our charging station, so if there's cars charging, constantly throughout the time that those chargers are turned on, that's maybe, 10 EV drivers. There's really no value to the advertisers to advertise and target those EV drivers. Who we are targeting are the eyeballs or the people who are walking into that establishment, which is one of the reasons why we're not trying to attract people's attention from the road. We really are just focused on pedestrians walking into that establishment. That's who the advertisers are targeting with our digital screens.
Thank you.
Other questions, Leslie?
Yeah. In general, I gotta say I'm in favor of anything that's going to increase our sustainability efforts. I just have a couple basic questions. You kind of touched on some of these, but I wonder if you do have data on consumer shopping patterns. So, say, is somebody more likely to use a similar grocer because they have these versus not? Just so that we can make sure that kind of some of the claims that we're making that this will potentially drive traffic to Downers Grove businesses, hopefully we'll get more people that are stopping by on their way to and from work, to home. Do we have any concrete data that kind of suggests that this could potentially change consumer shopping patterns based on the presence of these?
We do. We definitely have some case studies that I can share with you. I don't know, have we shared any yet? Yeah. No, we have case studies that we can share from our site partners. I'm thinking of one now. It's a grocer who talks about how this has positively impact their business. So we can definitely get that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anything else, good? Greg?
No questions left, but we wanted to dig into the policy of it. I don't want to preempt anybody else, though.
Start us down that path.
All right. I appreciate that everybody's been talking about the fact that this isn't really about the charging station, because we already allow electronic vehicle charging stations. The issue really is the sign, as has been laid out. I've been against electronic copy changing signs, I think, from the moment I sat down and the question was first posed to me while I was sitting here. And that goes back 7 years now. So in my mind, this is really sort of a sliding scale, a multi-layered issue. If we were talking about putting up a static paper sign behind a piece of plexiglass, I've got no problem with it. What's the difference between that and an electronic sign that's completely static? Absolutely nothing, and I recognize that. So I think we ought to go that far as well. My issue is really the changing nature of the sign. And I appreciate Commissioner Cullivaney's question and answer earlier about the nature of the PUD and not creating a precedent. From a legal perspective, I get that, but most people aren't going to really pay attention to that when it comes down to it. And they're going to expect that whatever we do here, we're going to be willing to do elsewhere in the community. So you can expect that if we say yes to this, we're going to get a whole lot of other requests. And it's not that long ago, we had them from 99 and I think 58, I could be wrong about that. And we'll get them from other businesses as well. So while we don't, and to one of the folks that spoke earlier, if you're seeing flashing signs and changing the signs and whatnot on Ogden Avenue, please know that it's not in Downers Grove. We haven't allowed those for quite some time. Our neighbors, they have different regulations. But that's the part that gives me pause. And the condition in the ordinance currently is 10 seconds, that it would have to be static for 10 seconds. I don't know that I'd be ready to say 10 minutes. Frankly, I'm thinking more about once an hour. Once a day would be a lot better in my mind. But if we're ready to go to the advertising piece of it doesn't bother me. The fact that it's electronic doesn't bother me. It's the copy changing nature of it, because we're going to see requests for these all over the place. And while, okay, from a legal perspective, and certainly I split legal hairs all day, that's what I do. But from a policy perspective, I'm not comfortable going there. So, yeah, I'm willing to get partway there, I guess. It's really the time. I want it to be able to, I understand the need to be able to change from a revenue perspective. You need more advertisers. That's where you get the revenue. But when it comes to the time limits on that, the longer the better in my mind. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Anybody else want to weigh in on Greg's question or concern about time? Nicole?
Not necessarily on time, but I agree with a lot of those sentiments. The sign ordinance has a long, deep history. And, you know, back in 2004, a subcommittee was established to study this. And for 17 weeks, we had people looking into this. As mentioned earlier, in 2015, the village, and I was not even around during that time, but the village considered a text amendment in regards to our local school district. And, you know, that ultimately failed and didn't proceed for, you know, entities in our community that provide such wonderful services to our children. And so while I understand that this request is specifically tied to this PUD, I think that precedent is a matter of opinion, and I share some of the similar concerns that Commissioner Jose does, where, and it was even mentioned that it would take others coming before us and doing what you have done. And I absolutely see that as potentially happening. I do appreciate the idea of maybe putting messaging that promotes the village on the screens. I do appreciate that it is difficult to see from the road, which is one of the issues that came up in the first place back however many years ago. But that's where I'm stuck right now, is we had 17 weeks of community engagement. In 2015, we denied our local school districts, and here we are today. So that's the struggle that I'm having. I'm absolutely not against charging stations whatsoever. I'm one of the people up here that drives a half electric vehicle. So that is not my issue at all. It is simply sign-based and the ordinance that was put in place, and how, and the time and structure that it took to put that in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, first of all, I attended the Plan Commission the other day, and occasionally I do that if it's a meatier subject. There's just no substitute from hearing the actual testimony. I have to tell you, I went in predisposed that, you know, no way on earth was I going to vote for this. And, you know, we're faced with these decisions, right? So you have something on the agenda, and you may formulate an instant decision, and sometimes it's hard, fast set and concrete. You say, no, I'm really opposed to that, and I'm going to come and articulate against it. So I actually went to that meeting, pretty close-minded, saying that people have fought long and hard over our sign ordinance. But then I started listening to the common sense of it. And what the essence of this is, we have a business that wants to open and operate within Downers Grove. I would trust this would not be your last. I also came to understand what the business model is. No advertising, no free. And people say, well, you should pay for that. Well, how many people listening at home and here use Facebook? Most people do, right? If you were charged for it, would you use it? Maybe not. But you're bombarded with ads, and you come to live with that. Somebody else is actually paying for that. And then understanding that you only have 1/5 the usage with charge stations means that's not a viable business model. That's not actually helping Downers Grove residents. So we have this sign ordinance. What bothered me about electronic sign is the flashing, the garishness. Downers Grove looks better and different because of our sign ordinance. But then I started looking at the restrictions that were put on this. First of all, as far as the total square footage, it comes out to 0.0072% of the 1 million square feet. They have to be 125 feet from the right-of-way. And even if this says a de facto precedent, if somebody said, well, if you're going to set a precedent and it has to be 125 feet from the road, that doesn't bother me at all. One of the plan commissioners said, well, every McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts is going to want to have one. And so I'm thinking, okay, so if McDonald's wants to put these 125 feet from the road, it would be behind their store. And if more people would go to a McDonald's in Downers Grove because they could plug in their car, you know, while they're there for a half an hour, so be it. Then the next thing is that the displays are not changing very quickly, once every 10 seconds. The video content, there's no flashing, no animation, no chasing, and no scintillating that's being displayed. So it was evocative to me of those kind of roller signs that, I don't even know if they still have them at bus stops anymore, where you're watching it and then it moves to something else. I don't particularly find that offensive. And as the lady in the audience said, we're constantly faced with signs. They happen to be backlit and they're stationary. So I've been in technology all my life. I'm not afraid of the new level of technology. I didn't like LED bulbs at first, but now my house is loaded with them because they make a lot of sense. So if you said that the restrictions are 125 feet from the road, they can be no larger than 27 inches high by 48 inches. You know, I think that's quite a restriction. No animation, and you have to provide a free service to Downers Grove residents and support the fact that we're a green village. So I totally flipped my mind around on this thing. And, you know, it's up to us to have the nerve to say to people, no, it's not 125 feet, don't even come here. We would give that instruction to staff, and staff would say, it's not a starter. You know, the village council really meant that. So, I mean, unless I hear some really tintillating, or what is it, scintillating arguments against it, I'm really leaning in favor of this.
Thanks, Rich. Let me give my 2 thoughts and 2 cents to the thought here. I'm glad everybody's focused on the sign, because it is, you know, a little bit of, in the audience, well, what the heck? I want to put a charging station in, how could that be bad, right? That really isn't. Greg started on the path, and it's important for everybody to realize this is a question that we have to sort through, because what's proposed right now doesn't fit in our ordinances. Whether that's smart, dumb, whatever, we have to work through this process, so you're watching that happen. Our sign ordinance is, it was an attempt to improve our community, and I think by all accounts it has done that. But I don't know, I guess I'm hard-pressed to accept the premise that any legislation is intended to never, ever change. That was 17 years ago. It's true, a few years ago we were approached and denied the concept. I actually didn't want to get into the concept. But every day that goes by, there's opportunities for business models to change, for cars to go from gas to electric, from signs to go from backlit LED, or from roller screens, as Rich talks about, the backlit LED, to now the bus stations in Chicago that have essentially an LCD screen. We can choose to say that we can't accept change, or in my mind, we can choose to accept, to define what conditions we want to accept it in, and try and mold it to those values that are important to Downers Grove. That was the purpose of the sign ordinance, was to try and reflect the village's priorities and values in our zoning code through signs. I'm not convinced that that is somehow thrown by the wayside or somehow diminished by a change like this. As Rich said, there's quite a few restrictions on this. We're talking about in a PUD. It is going to be precedent setting. There's no question about it. I would be shocked if we didn't almost immediately hear from the school districts. But I don't know that that's bad or wrong, guys. The question is, 17 years ago, what would an electronic sign have looked like? Even 6.5 years ago, what would an electronic sign have looked like? They may have been different. I'm certain they were. And I'm certain they wouldn't have been as controllable as these are now. And so I guess my question for my colleagues, I'm in full support of this draft motion. I think we ought to just run with it. There's a whole other aspect, which frankly is our business community is always looking for ways to try and improve themselves, advance themselves, rejuvenate themselves. Those malls down there are tough. There's no question about it. I made that comment about sales tax. If it has the inverse effect of drawing customers to Downers Grove who don't even live in Downers Grove, that's a huge plus for the village. I don't know if we're going to be able to quantify it as much as we maybe wish, but the idea that our mall owners, that our business owners, that our facility owners would be looking for ways to constantly improve their ability to draw customers is something we should be taking really seriously. And I think we should be taking it more directly than just saying, well, this is kind of what we said 17 years ago. We don't really feel like changing. They're changing. They have to. And we have to be part of that if we think we can live with it. I mean, it's a fair question to have. This is why we have these meetings. You're watching the sausage being made. My question to my colleagues is, if you're feeling like you're not in favor of this or you're feeling uncomfortable with it, I would like to know what kinds of things might get you to feel uncomfortable with it. Greg made the comment about time and frequency. Maybe there's some version of that that fits. I just don't want to hang our hat on, I don't want to be asked by somebody else because we've got a long-standing rule. To me, that's not enough of a decision-making process. So now you know my thoughts. If anybody's got anybody that's kind of leaning negative, wants to talk about what things might make them feel better, I'd love to hear it. Marge?
Oh, I don't have anything that's going to make me feel better. Advertising isn't new. We made a very conscious choice to restrict what was coming at us in a digital age, and these are going to be on the whole time you're walking in. I guess I also have a choice then to not shop there, because that might be what I'm doing. I didn't like it when you were forced to sit in a doctor's office and wait for the doctor and you were forced to watch videos nonstop on a loop. You know, it'd be terrible to just have to, the first thing I can think of off the bat is the Girl Scouts who are out there maybe selling cookies, who are watching this ad time after time after time after time. It takes you more than, you know, a handful of seconds to get out of that store and to load everything into your car and to get out of there, and you're confronted with the same ads over and over and over again. It becomes digital pollution at some point. You can't get away from them. It's got nothing to do with the charging station. That's great. You could have the same charging station dispense dollar bills, and you'd still have probably the same amount of people, probably more, drive up and want to you know, get their dollar bill or for parking there for 5 minutes or whatever it is. But that doesn't make the advertising in my mind any better. And we've got probably, depending on how you count them, at least 3 more, possibly 6 more shopping centers that are just like this. This is not unique in any way, shape, or form. So at least not to Downers Grove, that's for sure. One of the nice things about us is the peace and quiet, and I would, for one, would like to keep it that way. So everybody's got their own opinions, though. So.
Thank you. Kavanaugh?
Just kind of looking through this, I remember years ago, I worked for a company called Advertising Age, and we would do a report that actually tried to quantify the amount of visual noise, is I think how we would actually frame it. And this was years ago. And I think we've kind of reached a point where we have surpassed that concern. I think we're all being bombarded on a daily basis by so much advertising. I wonder how numb, in a lot of instances, we have become to it. And so I'm not opposed to definitely not opposed to the charging stations, not opposed to the idea of making changes, but what I would like for us to be considering or thinking about is, what does this look like for a larger charging network? We're seeing some of the business model and some of the benefits and how it could help retailers. I'd love to see some specific things in the master service agreement that relate specifically to the retailers in those areas. You mentioned the MSA earlier, and so I'd love to see something that's a lot more favorable leaning to kind of help them, whether it be cost of advertising, whether it be something that really focuses on those spaces, but without kind of running through my list currently. I would love to see something that gives us the opportunity to talk about this, but also in a bigger conversation, because we're seeing now driving to Meyer and some of the other places and just the need for the infrastructure. I'd like for us to have that conversation at some point.
So you would like a copy of our MSA, one that
No. I'm saying I don't necessarily need the MSA. I just, if we're talking about the retailers where the signage is going to be, and we're saying that we're reaching, the target market is reaching for those passerby customers, not necessarily the drive-by customers, it'd be great to see something that really is favorable in those MSAs that allow them to participate in that, in the advertising a lot more. So.
I'm going to pick up on something Kavanaugh said about infrastructure. You know, the idea that what would this look like in 20 years? Let's say that you guys were, Volta was highly successful, and everybody that had a business had a Volta charger. So now there's screens everywhere, right? That to me is something that doesn't bother me. And one of the reasons is because everything's a trade-off. You know, what we're really doing up here is trying our best to balance priorities, balance intentions, balance values. And one of the values we have is this, I think we collectively share up here, I know our community shares it, lots more, the nation shares it, is this whole idea of trying to find ways to make better environmental choices. But there's some reality to that. The village is not going to put in charging stations all over town. It's not going to happen. And so if we are in a position to be out of the way, I guess is one way of putting it, I think that's a helpful thing to our community long term, because nobody works for free. They don't. So somebody's got to pay for something. And a charging station can be put in by a store who believes it's enough of a draw for their customers. That's certainly one model. But the idea that charging stations would be funded in some way that requires a change in signage is something that I think it's hard to not, for me, it's hard to not have some appreciation for. The signage we're talking about is not, it's not the 294 billboards. It's not the jumbotrons on 294. And it's true, we're blasted with images all the time. But when we're talking about going to and from your parking lot, we're not talking about signs that are sort of blasting our neighborhood or distracting drivers, or I keep going back to what's the public benefit, and I'm not sure that the public benefit for me is to protect our residents from being bombarded by advertising. If bombarding, if a 2x4 in a parking lot is bombardment, but that seems, I struggle with that being the benefit or the purpose of our sign ordinance. I think our sign ordinance in the past, when we made those conscious decisions, was much more focused on the physical size of signs, and that's embedded all over it, and the idea of distracting drivers. And I don't think it does either of those things. I don't think there was a lot of discussion in 2004 about our signs and electronic signs, we make sure we don't bother people that are walking from their car to a building. So, Craig, you had more you wanted to add?
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that, though, Mayor. We regulate it certainly because of size, and I think most of the businesses in town would tell you that if they had a larger sign, they believe they'd get more customers out of it. They'd get more attention out of it. There's a reason you put up a big sign rather than a small sign. And the idea of it being a long-standing rule, and that's why we shouldn't change it, I don't think that's what you've heard necessarily. I think what you've heard is that we've had a lot of community discussion about it over a very long period of time, and that the concerns that were raised 17 years ago are still valid today. And whether the rule was made 17 years ago or 17 minutes ago, it still might be a good rule, and I believe it is. And when it comes to aesthetics, and when it comes to the placement of signs and the size of signs, the community, as you said, has made numerous value judgments. And in fact, we've been dragged all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to defend those value judgments when it comes to the sign ordinance. And even though the person who had that particular sign claimed that it brought them more revenue. So the idea that we're going to change this because we might get more customers, because we might get more sales tax revenue, it seems a little bit hypocritical at this point. We made, as a council, as a community, certain aesthetic judgments, and I believe those were sound then. I believe them to still be sound. We can make certain concessions without, I think, sacrificing those values completely, because, as you said, it is a balancing act. And I believe we can reach a balance, but I think what's been proposed here tips too far.
Appreciate that. Let's see if we can avoid the use of the word hypocritical. That would be helpful. Marge?
I just wanted to ask, do these chargers come with any other size screens?
No, they do not. Thank you. It's standard. One thing to add, and it may touch on Commissioner Gray's question, we're not going to saturate ever the entrance of a storefront or a mall. Reason being, if you have too many billboards, it dilutes the value of the advertising. So you're never ever going to pull into, a retail center and see 10 billboards. There's only so many that we can put. So to your point, it's not a distraction. It's like so much going on to the pedestrians walking by.
I get what you're saying, but there's only so many that you're going to put. What about somebody else who comes into that shopping center or is asking for the same thing?
Right.
Leslie?
Yeah. I have to say I'm much more in alignment with Mayor Barnett and Commissioner Colavini than anyone else. I recognize that we have a pretty storied history with our sign ordinance. I would really be interested to see if the community conversations today in 2020 are the same as they were 17 years ago. I don't know that we can definitively say that our community is in the same place now that it was 17 years ago, and the only way we know that is by having these conversations and hearing from the community. So I hope that, you reach out to us via email or talk to us or whatever the case may be. I guess I do, again, lean more towards the fact that this is a pretty strict agreement. We're saying it's got to be 125 feet from the right-of-way, restrictions on how quickly these move. To me, 10 seconds seems pretty reasonable if you really think about how long it takes you to walk by a sign that's maybe, 2 feet wide. It's probably not going to be drastically longer than a minute, so you might see a few different things advertised. I've actually been in the Whole Foods area. I wasn't shopping at Whole Foods, but I've been in the businesses in the area, and I actually checked these out after kind of hearing about this, and they are not in any way flashy. They don't move quickly. They're not some bright monstrosity. They're a reasonable sign. They are a little bit more reminiscent of the old style kind of flip like they would on paper. Really, even when you think about 5 years ago in 2015, to Commissioner Colavini's point, what LEDs looked like about 5 years ago and what they look like now are drastically different. Sure. They used to be that horrific, harsh, bright light, and now we have a variation of warmth. So I think the idea that because we made a decision in 2015 based on what standards were in 2015 versus what they are today would just be doing everyone, the community, the businesses who want this in their parking lots, a disservice to kind of not have renewed conversations as things come up. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go one way or another, but I don't think the argument that in 2015 we had these values based on the data and the products that we had available in 2015 is necessarily the same as it is today in 2020. So I'm very interested in continuing these conversations. I'm interested in the plan as it stands, and I just hope we hear more from the community about this.
Rich?
You use the phrase eyeballs. How many eyeballs typically see these things in a given day? I mean, do you have any
it would be based on location, but I can get you data on that.
I mean, what do you feel for this site? Are we talking about thousands of people, hundreds of people, dozens of people in a day?
Well, I mean, in essence, if the signs were turned on, it would be whoever walked by those signs.
So maybe hundreds of people,
Yeah.
shoppers that are going pretty much into that store. Okay. Do you have any?
Hopefully more once they're turned on.
Yeah. Do you have any videos that show this thing, or any still pictures that actually, so we could actually?
We have a diagram, but yeah, we can.
Because I understand the fear and concern, but I'm wondering if we're really afraid of, what our mind conceives of versus what the reality is. Like years ago, you could only get a television that was like this big, and weighed 300 pounds. And, you know, technology changed, so I said, yeah, wow, they're a lot lighter, they're flatter, they're cheaper. So people just kind of move forward.
Yeah, so this is a example of one of our stations, and then the back would look the same too. So very clean, very modern. We just, I believe it was a Green Tech Award we just won for the design of our stations too. We're very cognizant of the fact that, you know, we wanted to add value and not. I completely appreciate Commissioner Earl, you know, that just all signs, you know, I understand where you're coming from. And we are cognizant of that fact that we don't want them to distract, we want them to add, and we want them to be viewed not only by our site partners, but also the people visiting that establishment as something pleasing to look at. And, you know, not just a utilitarian kind of clunky charging station.
Have you gotten any complaints from the retailers that they don't want it there, it's garish, ugly, distracting in that shopping center?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Mm-hmm.
No. No, I mean, and they would have seen all this and before it went in, most likely. Yeah.
Well, I think, well, frankly, I know the expectation of the citizens is we need to do something about 75th and Lamont Road. I mean, there's a much more complicated situation just across the street. We still have the very vacant Walgreens on the end of that because someone who wanted to invest in Downers Grove got scared away because the residents were concerned about barking dogs. And we've put barking dog locations in other places, like in 63rd Street, no problems. There's one pretty close to the mayor's house, no problems there. There was a lot of concern about it, but because of the technology and then listening to the concerns, that was ameliorated. And I don't know if we've gotten any complaints about that. Like I said, I don't like the idea of garish signs. I don't like you know, hyper illumination, the flashing. I think it cheapens the village. I think as you drive down Ogden Avenue, you notice that the sign ordinance makes a difference, and I don't want to cheapen that. But you know, I think we need to do what we can to help those businesses in that shopping center, because brick and mortar is struggling.
Absolutely.
Kevin, please.
Just had one quick question. We were talking about this earlier. One of the things that I see with businesses, I equate what we're talking about to some degree, just because we're talking about the location and the radius, kind of reminds me of kind of the geo-targeting advertising that you see a lot of. And so as I kind of travel, you see a lot of companies trying to figure out marketing. It's one of the fastest changing, most misunderstood aspects of small business. And so you see, as you go from place to place, you will see different variations in social from an advertising perspective, and you'll see different forms of advertising and marketing. So I'm in favor of what we're talking about and what we're trying to do. Again, it is that balance, and so there's no question, no comments around the need for the infrastructure. Again, as we kind of work through this, I'm still interested in seeing the impact, that kind of that ROI for the clients, for the customers, as well as if we're talking about building out long-term an infrastructure that serves this growing EV community. You know, that's things that'll be kind of, I'll be kicking around in my head as well. But from an advertising perspective, I work in the space, I work with startups, and so I see different variations of things that are working from city to city all the time. And so nothing about the noise bothers me. We're kind of being inundated by it, and so that's not an issue for me. It is still that long-term balance of just the advertising versus the infrastructure. So no concerns of mine.
Excellent. And we, and I did a bit of research before I came tonight, and I know you are very well versed in marketing. You teach it as well. So we actually utilize AI. Okay. So when we work with a site partner, we can predict for them in the future. So as more EVs become prevalent and start taking over, gas vehicles, which is happening. I'm sure you've all seen most of the major automotive manufacturers are not even going to be producing gas vehicles like within the next 5 to 10 years. We have the ability for our site partners to recommend to them based on the data that we currently have. Okay, so we're going to start with these 4 stations, but maybe 5 years from now, you're going to need some non-media stations as well. So without the charger, the billboards, or fast chargers, we offer that as well. So we provide that to our site partner as well before we put the stations in the ground. And then as you see EVs grow, we can work with them on the infrastructure and not necessarily, we haven't touched on it, but not necessarily just media. It could just be non-media stations too. That's a different business model though.
So if we don't approve this, what happens to these charging stations?
I believe we will remove them.
So you don't see any part of your business model that works without, on a charge basis, a fee basis?
No, it's truly, I mean, I think we invest up to $130,000 just to install one station. And then we also provide, like I said, ongoing maintenance, which is a monthly cost too. We reimburse the businesses for any electricity that they use, and in some cases, we actually pay them a small rent fee for those locations. So it's a very capital-intensive investment on our part. So there has to be a way for us to provide the amenity for our site partners for free, and then also allow them to provide it to their customers for free. And really the only way to do that we've seen work in the space is with this media model.
And this whole range anxiety thing is pretty real, right?
It's very rare. It's probably the #1 reason why people hesitate buying an electric vehicle. And I think probably everyone here in the audience can speak to it. And like I said, I mean, usually you're going to charge in your garage. That's where 80%, 90% of your charging is going to be. But as people start seeing more charging infrastructure out there, it's that peace of mind that, okay, but yeah, if I go to the movies or I go to the grocery store, if I need to tap off, I can do so. I don't have to like panic about getting home.
Any other council comments or questions? I think I heard some calls for some additional market data, Leslie. I think you were interested in that. Rich was hoping for a video or maybe some additional photography. Kavanaugh, you were looking for some additional agreement information.
Follow up with some case
Yeah,
studies.
could we make sure that you've got notes on what we're chasing and you guys spend a little more time with our community development team and?
Sure.
Okay.
You guys have notes on that, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, we
you
have-
got-
Yeah, so I mean, we can follow up with case studies on the list to the businesses that install them, and then for Commissioner Gray, we can also, if you just want to see the positive impact it has on the advertisers by partnering with Volta and advertising on the sites, you can share that too.
Could we, this is going to sound a little odd, and Dave's going to probably kick me later tonight, but is it possible for us to turn one of these things on, give it a blank screen that rotate, that changes colors or something every 10 seconds and video it for a little while?
If 3 other people from the council join
Yeah,
in,
right,
we'll
sure.
be happy to do that.
This, well done, Dave, and he's exactly right, too.
So how do we let you know?
I guess one of the things is that the subject about, is it appropriate for our community, what distraction is it, how offensive is it to shoppers? It's a little tough. I think Greg thinks 10 seconds is very short, and I think Leslie thinks 10 seconds is very long, just in general from the conversation. So I'm wondering if there's some way that we could
That way we do
process that.
If this council wants to set up a time frame, direct us to set up a time frame, and we can go take a look at it, those kind of things, we'd be happy to do that, but I would like direction from the majority of the council to do that.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
Anybody else want to nod their head?
Yes.
Because I still want my concerns to be ameliorated, that it's not garish, it's not gaudy,
Yeah.
that it looks like a different type of lighting.
Yeah. We'd be happy, I mean, I don't know what is proper protocol, this is my first city council meeting, but if you wanted us to come with you too, when you turn them on and answer questions, we'd be happy to do that as well.
I think I'm seeing Kavanaugh and Leslie and Rich and I at least nodding their heads, maybe a couple others. Right? Everybody, yes?
Yes.
I'm speaking for people.
We could set up hot chocolate with the council and
There's, as you can tell, there's a lot of
through the,
concern
parking lot.
about this here, and it's, if, you know, it's, for those watching at home, and those in the audience who are sort of wondering why this is such a big deal, this is what we do. We try and balance the priorities and values of our community. We don't always get it right, and we don't always agree, but that's what we try hard to do. So please know that everybody that's sitting up here is trying their best to do that. There's no sort of, you know, bias about electronic vehicles or even electronic signs. There's an effort to reflect the community values, and is what we're trying to work hard to do. And so I appreciate everybody's time, and certainly your time. Anything else? Stan, Dave? Oh, sorry. Marge, please.
Just want to remind everybody that we are limited. We can't regulate content of these signs, ever. So once the sign is there, whatever the content is, we can't touch it. But the size of the sign and the length, where the sign is placed, those are things that we can regulate, what the sign looks like, the size of it, where it's placed. So please understand that we have no control over what is being advertised on the signs. So keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Marge. Appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to our next subject. Thanks for coming tonight, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution of amendment to a loan agreement with the Illinois, the Environmental Protection Agency. In June of last year, we entered into this loan agreement for water main improvements. This amendment is simply a disbursement schedule and repayment schedule. It's the next step in a multi-step process and will result, we will have one more amendment to close out this IEPA loan coming in the future. We'll be happy to answer any questions, and Judy is also here to answer any questions should you have any.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for being here, Judy. Anybody have any questions for Judy or Dave on this one? No? Okay. Anybody from the audience have any questions on this one? That was pain-free. Moving on.
Andy's not going to be so lucky with his presentation to the council, so I will call up our Public Works Director, Andy Sikich, for the final item, which is the village's $3.7 million investment in our road system. Andy.
Good evening. I will be brief. This contract is our annual road resurfacing contract. Was bid, and we got 4 bids, all pretty good bids. The low bid went to Geneva Construction Company for $3,760,357.89. It incorporates quite a few streets throughout the village, as you can see on this map here. Typically, we try to bundle the streets together to get better pricing, to make it less disruptive on the neighborhoods, and if there's any other work going on, we try to bundle it with that as well. So you can kind of see small clusters of streets throughout the village. And then here is a list of all the streets that we will be resurfacing with this contract this year. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thanks, Andy.
You bet.
Any council questions or comments on this? Audience questions or comments on our street resurfacing program? That was not so what you thought, huh? I'll just remind everybody, if you're here or at home, this information, particularly that list that might be interesting to you, is available on our website for tonight's meeting. It'll be under archive meetings shortly, but you can take a look and see if your street's on that list, and hopefully that'll be helpful.
And while you're on our website, check out the construction updates by topic or by project. It'll provide information that's maybe a little easier to get to and to find, and of course call us if you have any questions. That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
You're not off the hook. Manager's report.
Right in the manager's report. Last week, we refunded, or in layperson's terms, refinanced $20.6 million of existing bonds that we originally issued in 2012. Taking advantage of the lower interest rate environment saved the village and our taxpayers $1.7 million. That is much greater amount of savings than we originally anticipated when the council authorized this refunding several months ago. So it's always good to share great financial news. Happy to answer any questions that you may have on it. Thank you, that ends our report.
Nice work. Thank you.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
Thanks for staying on that and staying diligent, the whole team. Okay, attorney's report. Enza, do you have anything for us?
I do. I only have one item this evening, and that's an ordinance approving an amendment to Plan Unit Development Number 18 to permit off-premise electronic message board signs at 7221 7451 Lamont Road. It will be on next week's activity.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to our item 10, which is mayor and council member reports. This is an opportunity for council members to discuss anything that they're engaged with in the community, other boards or commissions are talking to, or other government bodies, or just things that they think are important for our residents to know. So with that, let's start with Kavanaugh tonight.
No reports, Mayor.
Marge.
No report, Mayor.
Greg.
Mayor, I have two, actually, so I'll make up for the lack of other ones. Just one last reminder that tomorrow, Wednesday, March the 4th, is the Passport to Dining by the Grove Foundation from 6 to 9 p.m. I believe you can still get tickets at Anderson Bookstore. There might be one or two left if you haven't gotten them already. Participating restaurants include Another Round, Valley Doyle, Cadence, Gatto's, and Orange and Brew, which is catering in food from Great Harvest Bread Company. If you've got a ticket, make sure you stop by Cadence. I'll be posted up there stamping your passports. The second one is a reminder that Village Hall is an early voting site. So if you haven't voted in the primary election yet, and you haven't been bombarded by enough advertisements to remind you to go out and vote, here's another one. The Village Hall is open from yesterday through Saturday, March the 14th. Monday through Friday, it's 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Go out and exercise the franchise. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Rich.
I just want to thank the residents who came to the Downers Grove Historical Society Tivoli tour, a presentation, an event, and silent movie, and I was absolutely fascinated by the tour of the Tivoli, and if you ever have a chance to do that tour, very well worth it. What a gem this place is.
Thanks, Rich. Leslie?
No report, Mayor.
Nicole?
I do have a report, Mayor. Thank you. The 2020 Mustang Trot 5K Run Walk is April 19th at 9 a.m. Downers Grove South High School, sponsored by the DGS Key Club and benefiting DGS Thinks Globally and Acts Locally. You can register, donate, or volunteer on their website, mustangtrot.weebly.com. That is all, Mayor.
Thank you. I have no report tonight, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.